Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of the Mental Health Truth Podcast. I am your host. My name is Marcus, but you can call me by my nickname, which is Truth. And if you don't know, essentially what this whole thing is going to be about, it's essentially my whole thing with mental health truth is that I'm trying to restore the truth back into mental health. You know, there are a lot of mental health professionals out there that give you some very quality advice, but some things you kind of just sit back and question. You think, that doesn't necessarily sound like it's the best way to go and to help people. Is there another way to think on how to help people? So that's kind of where I'm at. You know, my moniker, or what I go as, is providing information about anxiety, depression, and suicide from an outsider's perspective. So I'm by no means any mental health professional out there. I'm just trying to give my own critique and my own point of view through various mental health things. Because if you don't know, I've had depression for many years. It's over now. Ever since my first year of college, pretty much hasn't been affecting me as much. But you know, with everything, we all go through very tough times. We all go through negative thoughts, which is the topic for today's podcast, is negative thoughts. So I'm going to be referencing two articles throughout this whole podcast, and just giving my take on things, especially with negative thoughts. So, first thing I wanted to talk about is negative thoughts from someone with anxiety and someone with depression. So, if you look at a person with anxiety, right? So their amygdala, if you don't know what that is basically the area in your brain that deals with mood and fear. So the amygdala is on overdrive. So it's going on 120% miles per hour while the speed limit's only 40. Your brain's constantly thinking, it's constantly in fear, it's second guessing themselves. You're basically having so many thoughts in your head, you don't really know what's the right way to go through things. So that's essentially the anxiety part. So they essentially have fear over everything else in the world. They go through the world. Just imagine yourself walking in the sidewalk, on the sidewalk, or in the street, and every person you see is just danger. There's a potential danger, afraid of talking to people, afraid of just coming into contact with people. If someone asks you a question, you kind of get aroused, you kind of jump, you get very fearful very easily. And that's essentially the anxiety part. Now let's go to the depression part. Now, someone with depression, it's kind of the opposite. It's essentially the polar opposite of anxiety. So they feel very empty, they feel hopeless, they feel they just don't have a lot of energy. It's they just don't want to move, they don't want to do anything. It's it's essentially the end of the world for themselves. But the thing is, with their their speed limit, they're going 20 miles per hour when the speed limit's 40. They're going too slow. So there's no balance there of essentially acting as how they would like to. And with depression, they don't necessarily fear everyone else outside of the world. They essentially think on themselves. So they are looking at themselves as this horrible person that they fear themselves. So when you think of the brain, so to speak, we're wired to think more negatively than positively. So when we think we always have negative thoughts, and that's for survival reasons. So if we didn't have negative thoughts and we only thought positively, we would go through life and think every situation would be positive, no matter how bad it may be to us. Let's say like you get hit by a car, and you'll not see that as a negative. You'll just see that as a positive. So it's in a good sense that we think more negatively than positively, but there's a way on how to have that balance between the two. But essentially, back to what I was saying. So with the negative thoughts, so with depression, you typically have the negative thoughts to yourself. With anxiety, you typically have like negative thoughts and fear to everyone else around you. So try to picture someone with anxiety and depression. It's like polar opposites, and they have it. So they have fear and negative thoughts towards other people around them in the world, and also themselves. So it's like there's no way out. It's like they're in a room, and everything is locked in, and the walls are just coming closer and closer and closing them in. Like there's no way out of that. So we're gonna talk about the negative thoughts and whatnot. So I am going to reference this first article. So this article is on thebestbrainpossible.com, and it's talking about negative thinking patterns and what negative thinking does to you. So I'm just going to read a little bit of what it says. So it says, habitual negative thinking patterns become physical neural traits in your brain. If you get stressed out often about every little thing, your brain is going to forge and strengthen connections, making it reactive and anxious. So that's essentially what anxiety is. You get stressed out about everything, even if it's something super small. Like, let's say if you're a straight A student and you got to be on a test, you would freak out because you're not used to that. It's something very different for you. So, yeah. If you expect the worst in all situations, you're reinforcing this kind of thinking in your brain every time you engage in it. Now, I wanted to talk about that for a second. So, for me personally, like, I recommend that kind of thinking, but not necessarily how they're referencing it. So I think it's beneficial to think to expect the worst possible case scenario in a situation. So let's say you want a job, right? There's this job that you always wanted, and you walk in and you have an interview, right? So if you think in the worst possible scenario, the worst thing that can happen is they don't want you for the job. They don't think you're right for it. You essentially are not going to get the job, and you're going to be upset about it. You're going to be disappointed. But if you go into that mindset before you even got into the interview and think, the worst thing that can happen is that they may not want me. So what can I do to prepare for that? Could I research the company more? Ask them very engaging questions, come up with really good answers, or get the next interview that I would like to have in a different company for the same position. How can I get ready for that as well in case if this doesn't work out? And then a thing I recommend after you think of the worst case scenario is to do the complete opposite. So you're looking at two ends of the extreme. So you're looking at the worst possible thing, and now I want you to look at the best possible thing. What's the best thing that can happen to you in this situation? You get a job, they like you, they could even have you in a higher position that you wanted. Like the best thing that can happen. But make sure that it's likely to happen. You don't want to say like, the best thing that can happen is I go into the interview and they want me to run the company. Like, that's not really rational. You want to stay pretty rational in these type of situations. So after you've done that, you thought about the worst thing that could happen, and then you thought about the best thing that could happen. Now, usually more than not, what the outcome is going to be somewhere right in the middle of that. Now, you may get the worst end and the worst thing does happen, or you may get close to the best thing that could happen. But most likely that you're going to have the outcome be right in the middle. So since you've gone through that thought process, you can kind of prepare yourself for any situation that comes. And to ask yourself this one question: if the worst possible thing happens, is it something that I can live with and go throughout my life with? Like, if it's something that's going to hold me back a lot, if the worst thing happens, then it's probably best for me to not do it. If it's something that I can live with the worst possible thing, then more chances than not I should do it. Because again, like I said, the worst possible thing is not really going to happen most of the time, especially if you think this way and kind of prepare for it. So you kind of take a step back and analyze the situation. Say, what can I do to get the best potential outcome for this? And if it's if it's really bad outcome, what can I do to further myself to make it into a positive outcome? Just to make yourself not dwell on it as much, because like if you go through like a negative situation, and like you weren't prepared for it, like you didn't expect that to happen or that kind of thing to happen to you, then you're going to feel really bad about it. You didn't expect it to happen, and like now you're trying to pick up the pieces without really a direction to go to. You didn't take a step back and look into the situation. You're just kind of in the situation and reacting to it. Sometimes you just gotta step outside of the box and really just look into things and just look into every situation that you go through. So that's why I believe like expecting the worst possible thing can actually be beneficial to you and not necessarily hurt you in any kind of way. Now, let's talk about the different kinds of negative thinking patterns that you may go throughout your life. Now, you may have heard all of these things. Like, you may have said all of these statements before, but I guarantee you had no idea what the name of it is and what to do about it. Unless if, like, you took a psychology class, but I'm pretty sure most of you haven't taken a psychology class or looked up anything in psychology. So, the first one is called black and white thinking, or essentially what it used to be referred to, or I believe it's still referred to, but they're calling it black and white thinking. This is essentially all or nothing thinking. So the example that they gave was, I can't even do this, I never do anything right. So it's essentially, let's say you do something, and this is I would say this is more towards the depression aspect than anxiety aspect, because like it's basically towards yourself. You think you can't do anything right, everything's just wrong. And this could be from many things. Maybe you've always been told that you're never good at anything, that you do everything wrong. Let's say if you're a bad student at school and like you get a bad grade on a test, you may think like, what's the point of even doing this if I'm just gonna fail anyway? And we'll get to that kind of example. That's another negative thinking pattern. But essentially, all or nothing thinking is you're all in, or it's not gonna work out. And this is typically true with like perfectionists. Like if like you do a job or you do a task and you do it 99%, it's not good enough for you. You have to have that 100%. If it's anything less than that, you kind of feel disappointed in yourself. Like, oh, I didn't do the best that I could, and this is just not working out for me. I need to fix it. Like, there's something wrong with me at this point. But with all or nothing thinking, it's more towards depression because it's geared towards yourself. You're saying this about yourself. No one is necessarily saying this to you, but you have that thought and that mindset that you did this wrong. Like, you go and try to do something and it's really difficult for you, so you're just like, there's no point in trying. like I can't do this, I never do anything right. And that's like a really like bad, like it's a bad way to think about things, because like you can easily change it, and I'll go into like how to like change it after I go through these negative thinking. So the next one is called mind reading. And this is something I do all the time. I'm not even gonna lie to any of you. And I'm pretty sure like you've done it all the time as well. It's essentially when you like, like when you're young, you kind of like care about people's opinions a lot, but it's not. It's like the opposite. It's you're saying their opinions without them even telling you. So like you're going to their head and saying like, they must think I'm a loser. They must think like I'm really bad at this, Like you're putting words into their mouth and they never said it to you. So the example that they gave was they think I'm boring. I know they have better things to do than hang out with me. Essentially like what it is. And like I do that a lot, but like cuz like I'm always thinking, even if it's positive or negative, like I know like how to shift it from negative to positive and positive. Like I may go to like content or whatever, but I do this a lot because like I don't know, I just like I've always been that kind of wallflower person. Like at school, if you don't know what like a wallflower is, it's like a person that kind of like sits in the back and just like observes everything. So that's essentially the kind of person I was. Like I like to observe everything. I'm like, I wonder what they're thinking right now. They probably like think like if they're like hanging out with a friend, I'm like they probably think like that person's really weird, that person that's coming up to them or something. Like I don't know, it's weird, but that's something that I do quite often. But I don't do it as much as I used to. Like I stopped caring that much about like other people's opinions, or like I don't really like, this is more of like kind of like a people pleaser kind of thing. Like you want to please people, like they may think I'm a loser if I do this, so let me do something that they enjoy. So they will want to hang out with me. They won't think I'm boring, Because, like, with the boring statement, I use this all the time. I say to myself, I think I'm boring. I don't say other people think I'm boring, but I say I think I'm boring to other people. Just because of the things that I enjoy. But I know, like, I haven't met those kind of people that enjoy the things that I do. It's just the people that I'm with. Like, it's different with this one because like you can kind of get a good reading of this, like numerous things like nonverbal cues, like their facial expression. Like if they're just not paying attention to you, you're gonna have that thought like, oh, they don't even care about what I'm saying, so why am I even talking about this right now? Like those are like, this would be like the most kind of rational negative thinking style based on those things, because you can see nonverbal cues or verbal cues. They may say something that sounds similar to the statement, and you kind of analyze what they've said and kind of make a generalization based on it. So I would say like out of all of these that I'm going to talk about, this is probably the most rational one, because there's so many ways to like kind of tell and kind of like read people. Like there's certain things that you can like read from people. Like also, for example, like if you look at personality types, like the kind of personality type you are, like for me, I'm INFJ, and like INFJs typically like can read people. Like they understand when like someone's not paying attention or when someone doesn't care. So I typically say these things all the time, but I don't let it get to me. Like I don't see it as a negative thinking way, because I'm not thinking about it all the time. It's like I have that thought and then I'm done with it. But enough of mind reading. Let's go to the next one. This one's called crystal ball gazing. And the example that they gave is there's no point in even trying. I know I'm not going to get the job anyways. So this is what we were talking about before with the kind of like expecting the worst possible case scenario. It's like, I can try to do this, but I just know it's not going to work out. And you could say this is also could be a rational negative thinking style if it's backed up. Like, for example, like, let's say someone is bad at getting in relationships, right? Like, let's say they've never had one, or the ones they've had were terrible. So they may think there's no point in even trying, I'm never going to be in a relationship, right? But if you look at that and look at the history that person's had, they haven't had a good time or a good experience with it. So based from their sample size, they came to that conclusion that it's not going to work out. Even though in the future there's a possibility that it's going to work out. There's always a possibility. But just from this thinking point of view, you can kind of understand where they're going from. It's negative, but you can understand where it's coming from. But also on the other hand, there's always a point in trying. Even though it may seem difficult, if you try little by little each day, then you can overcome whatever it is you're trying to get. For this example, you're not going to get the job anyway. There's many things that you can do. You can prepare for the job even more. You could look for a different job that you would really like and prepare that while you're going into this job interview and you're getting ready for this job. So you always have a backup plan, and you know that you tried your best and that's all you can really give. That's something that you can be proud of, that you tried, you gave it your 100%, you gave it all your effort, even though you did a bad job, so to speak, or even though you didn't get the job. That's their loss, not mine. They could have benefited and gained from me being on the team and providing valuable information and valuable work skills, but they decided not to go with me, and they decided to go with someone else. That's their loss. It's just another way on kind of how to flip that around. And this one will also be more towards the depression side. There hasn't been really anything with the anxiety side besides mind reading. I'd say mind reading is more towards anxiety and depression. It will be more towards both, because they have they're using they. So you're using a third person instead of a first person. You're saying that the people that are around you think that you're a bad person. And then you're using an I statement. I think, or I know that they have better things to do than to be around me. So it's kind of both. It's kind of both. But the next one is overgeneralization. The example they give: this relationship didn't work out. I'm never going to meet someone. So this is essentially kind of similar to the other thinkings. This is similar to all or nothing, or black and white thinking. The relationship doesn't work out, so you believe that it's never going to work again. There's no exceptions, even though you just was in a relationship. So you typically feel like you're lucky to be in this position. You're lucky to have that one friend that always cared about you, and now they're gone. You're never going to have that again. You're lucky that you had the job that you've always wanted, and now you're getting fired, so you're never going to get that kind of job again. You just believe that it's such a bad, it didn't turn out as good as you expected it to be. So now it's never going to work out again. This will also be another perfectionist kind of thing. And this would be also anxiety and depression. It doesn't use any third person for anxiety, so to speak, but it's talking about the other person as well. So the relationship has two parties. It has you and the other person, and you're saying that the relationship didn't work out. So it could either not have worked out based on what you have done. Maybe you did something that negatively affected the relationship, or the other person has done something bad that has negatively affected the relationship. And you may think that it's never going to have that again. So essentially, something really good happened to you. You were in a really good situation, and then all of a sudden things stop working out. So you think, I'm never going to get that feeling again. I'm never going to have as good of a moment as I did when I was in that situation before. So that's essentially what that is. The next one is disqualifying the positives. This is something I feel like a lot of people do. They overlook the small things and just look at the bigger picture. So the example that they give was, I may be a decent mother, but anybody can do that. And let's say if that's right, let's say anyone can do that, but you're the person that's actually doing it. So you should give, I wouldn't say should, you can give yourself credit for doing that. You actually did something you did something great, even though it's something that, let's say, anyone can do, but you did it. Like, you're looking in a wide range of everyone instead of just looking at yourself. Like, there may be some things that are hard for you that a lot of people may think it's easy, but the fact that you were able to do it yourself, and that you were able to overcome like what you were dealing with, is a huge thing. Like, the small victories really count. Like, if let's say you look throughout your day and you may think, I had a really bad day today. Now just kind of step back from that and look into it. Like, did I really have as bad of a day as I thought I did? And you look at the things that you did. You got up in the morning, you worked out, you exercised, you hung out with friends, and you read a book. You went to work, and you did, you essentially enjoyed yourself until the point of, let's say you had a terrible customer. A customer really just messed up your day, and like, your coworkers weren't the best kind of people. They were just not being as friendly and as nice to you as you would like them to be. So you see that because we, like I said before, we tend to focus on the things that, the negative things for our survival, and just to figure out how we can overcome that. So we focus so much on the negative things, when in reality, like, the negative could be super big, like super huge and astronomically huge. But if we have a bunch of small positive things that we do, then that can overtake that one negative, even if it's big. Like, if you just look at it from face value, you have one negative and 5 positives. You have more positives than negative, regardless of how big that negative was. You had more positive things. So your day might have been as bad as you thought it was, and it could have been actually good for you. This would be more towards anxiety, I would say, even though it uses I, because you're looking at it from a wide perspective. You're looking at it from, everyone else can do that. And essentially, like, yeah, I did it, but it was an easy task. And it may not have been easy for other people, and you don't give yourself credit for the things that you actually do, which is unfortunate. But that's essentially what a lot of people go through, especially with anxiety and depression. And the next one is another one that I do a lot. And I feel like a lot of people do this. And essentially, it's called overreacting. Everyone overreacts to a situation. And this one is like, you could also say it's similar to mind reading, essentially. Like, you overreact to something based on like the sample size you've had. So I'm going to read the example first. My friend hasn't replied to my text in 3 hours. I definitely know how that feels. It's more like 3 days or like 3 weeks. But anyways, let's keep going. So my friend hasn't replied to my text in 3 hours. She hates me. Nobody likes me. So, like, like it's like that feeling's understandable to have if like you were like, let's say if you were depressed and looking to your friend for support and they didn't respond in 3 hours, like you have no idea what that friend was doing. More chances than not they'll say like, oh, I was busy, I had a lot of things that I was doing, when in reality you weren't doing anything at all, you just didn't want to talk. And you could get that feeling, like they hate me. Like they think that nothing's good right now. Like everything is wrong. I can't necessarily do anything right. You know, like we all overreact to situations. And because like that's essentially like what we're used to. Like we're used to having like situations that we've been through so many times. So you either get to a point where you say like I'm used to it, or like you overreact like, oh, of course you're doing this, like why do I even bother trying to like message you or text you? Like it's obvious that you don't care about me at all. Like you overreact to a situation and it might not be as bad as you thought it was, but it's understandable where those people come from. But it's also a negative thinking. It's something that you have negative thinking, like it's not a good way to think, to overreact to things and just react things from face value. Like if like someone was like, oh, I couldn't make it, I was busy, like just take it to face value, like sure they were busy. You may know that like they weren't busy and they just didn't want to be around you, but like that's also a reality too. A lot of people, like especially like with the rise of like social media and stuff, a lot of people are not honest with others. They will say like they were doing something when in reality they weren't. They just didn't want to hang out with you or didn't want to be around you at all. Like no one's really truthful or honest with each other. So it can lead to overreacting a lot of the time. Like you haven't done this in a long time. Like I don't believe you. It's just like if more people could be honest and open, then you can see like what can happen. But that's just my opinion and my take on it. Now, the next thing is a good one, and I feel like a lot of people kind of tell people to do this, and it's not necessarily like great advice. You'll hear this from a lot of like if you watch like any like kind of huge successful person, or like an entrepreneur person, or like someone that like tries to motivate you, they'll kind of do these things. They'll kind of tell you to like do these things, and this one's called unrealistic expectations. So the example they gave is, I have to get straight A's, nothing less is good enough. So this is just basically perfectionist. Like if you do something less, like it's not good enough. Like you have to keep going, you have to keep pushing. If you do something bad, it's terrible. Like you have to like fix yourself. Like what you did was wrong. No matter how hard that test was, you have to get 100%, no matter what. If you don't, then it's not good enough. You might as well just throw it away and erase it. So it's like you hear like you have to, all you hear from these people are like set like astronomical goals, like make them so unrealistic so that everyone can think you're crazy. Like everyone, like no one will know what they're talking about. They'll all tell you that you can't do this, and then you prove them wrong essentially, which like doesn't necessarily make sense for me. You'll want to make realistic and smart goals that you can set for yourself, so you can see the progress that you're making, seeing the improvements that you're making, so then you can strive for better. That's just me. This one would fall into, well, this is just perfectionism, but this one will fall into this one really fall into a category of anxiety or depression. If I had to choose, it would be depression, but that's just me. And there's 3 more. The next one is name calling. I can't believe I said that, I'm such an idiot. So it's essentially like you just made a mistake and like you can't necessarily accept it. You can't believe you said what you said. I wish I didn't say that, but I did. And sometimes, like, you say things that you don't necessarily, you don't necessarily quote unquote mean, but deep down inside, there was some ounce of truth into what you said. It's just you didn't want it to come out that way. So, like, you wish you could take it back and say, like, what you really meant, even though there was some truth into what you were saying. That this would be falling under depression as well, using the I statements. The next one would be self-blame. The boss looks mad. It must be something I did wrong. So this is, like, essentially the same thing. This is the same thing as mind reading. Like, you see the cues. Like, this is another, like, kind of rational, like, close to rational negative thinking. Like, you see the cues, you see the facial cues of, like, the person being mad, so you think you did something wrong. Like, I feel like it's not necessarily, like, something wrong about thinking that way. Like, you could think of it better, but, like, you can actually, like, go and ask the boss, like, are you mad at me? Did I do something wrong that you don't necessarily like at the moment? Instead of, like, kind of just speculating and believing that, yeah, I did something wrong, I'm in trouble. That would be the way to, like, change that kind of negative thinking pattern. Also with, like, mind reading and overgeneralization. Just, like, actually knowing the answer instead of assuming that you know the answer based on what happened around you and, like, the cues that you get. But yeah, this one would also fall under anxiety and depression because you're blaming yourself, so you're thinking bad about yourself, but you're also looking at someone else saying the boss looks mad. So you don't necessarily know what to do. You're kind of freaking out on, like, what you should do to get out of the situation. And the last and final one is catastrophizing. Since I can't pay this bill, my credit rating will go down the tubes and I'll lose the house. So it's essentially a slippery slope. So one bad thing happens. If that one bad thing happens, that leads to another bad thing happening, which leads to another bad thing happening. So it's essentially like you're never going to get out of this, like a rabbit hole. You're never going to get out of this hole. Every time you climb up, you go 2 steps back. And you can't really get out of it. This would definitely be anxiety and depression. It uses I a lot, but you're overreacting to the situation. It's essentially overreacting. You're overreacting to it. Because, like, you can't see a way out of this. You're just saying that everything's going to just be negative. One thing's going to lead to another. And you don't necessarily know how to get out. You're just trapped into the situation with nothing else to go. And, like, the depression, like, you're blaming all of this on yourself. Like, like, one bad thing happens, leads to 2 more bad things happening. It's just so negative for me. Like, I can't get out of this. I truly can't get out of this negative thinking pattern. But now, those are the negative thinking patterns, the different ways to negative think. You probably have said all of these things in your life, but you never knew, like, what name it was and, like, where it would fit. Either anxiety or depression. You don't necessarily know how it would feel. So that's essentially about negative thinking patterns. Now I want to go to how to challenge the negative thinking patterns. So with most of these statements from the negative thinking patterns, there's a word that you can add right at the end of it. So for example, if you take the statement from all or nothing thinking or black and white thinking, where it says I can't even do this, I never do anything right. So just changing that statement. Use that same statement and change it to this. I can't do this yet. I cannot do anything right at the moment. But I know that you essentially know that you can. Like, it just hasn't happened yet. You just haven't got to that point where you can do this thing correctly. So, like, using yet is, like, really, like, beneficial for you. Like, if you use yet, I'm not good at this yet. I won't be in a relationship yet. Like anything, like I'm never going to meet someone. I haven't met the right person yet. There's no point in even trying. I'm not going to get the job anyway. Like I may not get that job, but I can get another job. Like there's always a different way and a different perspective to look into things. So it's the most important thing is to be consciously aware of the things that you're going through. So when you notice that you're in a tough situation, like step outside for a minute and just look at it and say to yourself, like, like I'm going through this right now. Right now I am overgeneralizing the situation. What can I do to get myself out of the situation? What are the necessary actions that I can take? Maybe I can write this stuff down, write the kind of negative thoughts I'm having, and how can I change it so it doesn't have an effect on me. Because what you hear a lot from a lot of mental health professionals is to change negative thoughts into positive thoughts. And that's not necessarily the best way to go through it, because you can change negative thoughts into positive thoughts all you want, but you don't necessarily believe in those positive thoughts. You can have an easily positive thought that's completely irrational and will never happen, and you're just setting yourself up for failure. So, and also with that, negative thoughts into positive thoughts, if you remember how the brain works, we think of more negative thoughts than our positive thoughts. So by the time we fix our positive thoughts, we're going to get more negative thoughts. There's we're never going to keep 100% positive thoughts in our head. There's always going to be something that comes into mind that's negative and kind of sets us back. But we do have the control, and that's important, the control. We can control how we react to these negative thoughts and the negative situations that we're in. For example, if you're in a negative situation, one thing we do have control over is the environment that we're in. We can change our environment. Let's say if it's people that don't necessarily treat you right, you can get out of that environment and find a different environment that's better for you. If you feel like you don't get along with people, you can get out of that environment and find a different environment. If you feel like you are positive in the situation and you're surrounded by negative people, you can get out of that situation and find more negative people to help you out and to essentially lift you up instead of bring you down. So that's just some ways to think about it. So whenever you're having negative thoughts, you want to not necessarily change the negative thoughts into positive ones. You want to make it so the negative thoughts don't affect you as much as they did before. And the way you can do that is by changing your environment and to just be consciously aware of the situation at hand and analyzing it and brainstorming ways that you can do, things that you can do to get out of it. And just being in that process. Don't expect it to just go away just like that with the blink of an eye. Things take time, and just figuring out, you may think that you don't have time and you have to do this instantly, and there's situations where you go through that. But in the whole aspect of things, you want to take things slow and just take a step back and just visualize and analyze what's actually going on around you. Sometimes we react to things and not necessarily know what we're dealing with. That's kind of where we are. We're in the situation but don't really know what's going on in the situation. So how can we prepare for that and plan on the best way to tackle the situation? If you're just reacting to it as you go, then you can make mistakes. You will feel bad if you mess up, or if you always think, there's something I could have done to make things better, but you didn't because you were reacting to it. And that's what a lot of people do. A lot of people react to things instead of taking a step back and thinking about it and planning things out. It's essentially going with the flow instead of taking time to make sure that what you're going through, like, you can deal with and you can plan the best way possible. So that's essentially the end of the first episode. Thank everyone for enjoying this and just being on this ride and this journey with me with mental health and trying to help people with it. So just as a recap of everything, like, if you're going through anxiety, depression, you can even say stress, just looking at your negative thought patterns, like negative thinking styles, and just writing them down and think of different ways to, like, change that. What can I do to think about this differently, or to actually do this differently? Seeing things from the worst case scenario, like, can I live with this if it's the worst possible thing? And if I can, how can I plan for it and get ready for it so the worst thing actually doesn't happen and something more towards the middle, or maybe even a really good thing, can happen for me? And just being consciously aware of the situation that you're in, your current state of mind, instead of reacting to every situation. Because when you're consciously aware, you can take a step back and analyze everything. You can see what works, what doesn't work, and you can plan for it mentally in your head, which will go a long way, instead of just, kind of reacting to things and going with the flow. And if something bad happens, you can prepare for it. So that's essentially the end of the podcast and the video. So again, thank you everyone that watched or listened to this. You guys are the best. And let me know what you think about it. Let me know what you think of negative thinking patterns and the ways that you can deal with it. And if you believe that changing negative thoughts into positive thoughts is actually helpful. So thank you all for watching, and see y'all later. Catch you on the next video.